Hi, everyone, and good afternoon. Thanks for joining us and welcome to the Future Ready Workforce series. My name is David Jury. I will be your host today as we explore together the topic of building inclusive workplaces for 2SLGBTQIA+ students. As you may know, June is National Indigenous History Month in Canada, and Indigenous peoples have lived on this land for time immemorial, and their unique histories shaped the Canada that we know today. And I'm speaking to you now from the University of Waterloo, which is situated on the Haldimand Tract, the land granted to the Six Nations that includes 6 miles on each side of the beautiful Grand River and is the traditional territory of the neutral Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee people. I think that this is a really special place where I'm proud to live and work and raise a family. And this month I plan to, go and explore those traditional lands. And I really encourage you to reconnect this month with the places in which you live, and especially to learn more about the Indigenous peoples who continue to live there too. So the Future Ready Workforce series is brought to you by the Work Learn Institute, which I'll get to in just a moment. We're housed under the University of Waterloo's Co-op and Experiential Education portfolio, which has been offering work-integrated learning programs like cooperative education for over 65 years. And it now celebrates one of the world's biggest WIL programs with over 25,000 students in over 120 programs, connecting with thousands of employers all over the world. The conversation today is definitely connected to that program, but we hope that you'll learn something that might be appropriate to the particular WIL programs that you're interested in and the organizational settings in which you operate. So a little bit about the Work Learn Institute. We're a group that conducts research and offers education and consulting services on the role of work-integrated learning in talent development. And as part of that work, we've offered the Future Ready Workforce series for the past 3 years. Through 2024, we're spotlighting issues of access and equity in WIL and its relationship to organizational practices. So I'm really happy that you could join us for that. Today's session, in particular, focuses on the 2SLGBTQIA+ community. Everyone kind of, that's a bit of a mouthful. Sometimes it's called alphabet soup. I think about it as an acronym for two-spirit, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, or questioning, intersex, asexual, and additional sexual orientations and gender identities. But you may hear me use other acronyms today, such as LGBT, and that might be intentional because I might be referring to a specific subgroup, maybe if I'm referring to a study or particular program. I'm really fortunate today that I get to learn from 4 great speakers, and you'll meet all of them in just a few minutes. Beck Malotzi is an inclusion and diversity worker for the YMCA of the Three Rivers and former co-op student at the University of Waterloo, who I actually got to work with during one of her co-op work terms where she was a research assistant in our group. So it's so cool to have Beck back here talking about this work. We're also pleased to be joined by 3 speakers from Sienna: Andy Winter, Global Director DEI, Brittany Koa, External Communications Associate, and Robin Chang, Software Test Engineer. We'll hear more about Sienna and the work that they do in just a few minutes. In today's session, though, you'll first see some recent research on the 2SLGBTQIA+ employment experiences literature, focusing on experiences of cooperative education students who are venturing into organizational roles, some of them for the very first time. After that, our speakers will form a panel and we'll respond to some selected questions about creating inclusive workplaces for students. And finally, we'll have some time for audience questions. So I wanted to begin our conversation today with a very clear position, and that is that creating inclusive workplaces is fundamentally a very good thing. The research is pretty clear on this and shows that inclusive workplaces are good for people, the organizations in which they work, and for economies in general. For instance, a review of research by the Williams Institute in the States found that there's likely a positive relationship between LGBT supportive policies at work and the health of workers from the LGBT community. Similarly, another study of government staff in the US showed that the more inclusive a workplace was perceived to be by LGBTQ workers, the greater their job satisfaction and organizational commitment to their employer. So it's pretty obvious that inclusive workplaces seem to be promoting well-being and positive feelings about work. And it turns out that that might be really good for employers too. In a recent study, researchers examined the association between LGBT-friendly policies and firm performance, also in the US. This is where most of the data are coming from. But we can make assumptions about how this would work in Canada as well. And that research found that the more LGBT-friendly firms had higher profitability and higher stock market evaluations. And this is consistent with an earlier study from 2020 that showed firms that were more welcoming of diverse workers were also more innovative. And so this innovation is probably the mechanism that leads to better financial performance. Further, there's a recent book from an economist named Lee Badgett, who wrote a book on the subject that demonstrates homophobia and transphobia globally can cost upwards of 1% of a country's gross domestic product, which is just staggering. It's just mind-blowing. So we think that transforming exclusionary practices at work into inclusive ones probably benefits all of us, regardless of your membership in various identity groups. The issue is that figuring out how to do this remains really complicated. Take, for instance, that Pride at Work Canada and Great Place to Work collected survey data about 2SLGBTQIA plus experiences at work. And what they found is rather concerning. 30% of members of this community at work experience discrimination. And for comparison, only about 3% of the general population has had that experience. So it's a pretty big gap. The survey also showed that a quarter of workers reported that they're not supportive of having a supervisor who's from the 2SLGBTQIA plus community. And only a small percentage of organizations require their people managers, the people who are actually managing people at work, to possess knowledge about inclusion. And this is especially concerning for a few reasons, particularly against the backdrop of recent survey data. Consider that a Gallup survey showed that 1 in 5, 19.7% of people from Gen Z identify as members of the queer community. And so what we have is a generation of emerging workers who are moving into a landscape of organizations that seem kind of unprepared to welcome them and their identities. And actually, just a few days ago, Ipsos shared results of their global survey on attitudes towards the LGBTQ community. And results there demonstrate that support for that community in Canada is under threat, and we're trending in the wrong direction. My colleagues and I have explored some of these issues specific to the work integrated learning context, mostly the co-op program at the University of Waterloo. In one recent study, for instance, we spoke with LGBTQ plus students about the barriers that they experience to success while they're venturing into a co-op work term. We found several of those barriers, but I just wanted to highlight 2 of them here for you. The first is the issue of masking. Students told us that they felt that they could not be their authentic selves at work and instead masked aspects of their identity during recruitment and in the workplace. And second, and relatedly, students told us that organizational cultures continue to stigmatize LGBTQ plus identities, which negatively impacts students' sense of belonging, their work engagement, their learning outcomes, and ultimately what it matters for you folks is their relationships to various employers and career paths. So it's at this point that I'd like to invite Beck from the YMCA to join us to speak a little bit more about the work that she's doing through the YMCA of Three Rivers, including some of the research, and also to comment on some of the research that we did together on the LGBTQ plus student experience at work. So Beck, thanks for joining us today, and I'm handing it over to you.
Thanks so much. So yeah, I'm here working from the YMCA, and I'll get a little bit into my role in a second. As Dave mentioned, my name is Beck. My pronouns are either she, her, or they, them. And I'm gonna just address the elephant in the room. That's my cat, Pearl. I include her in all of my presentations that I do because right now I'm working from home, doing this from home, and she sometimes comes to help me with my presentation. So just a heads up. Anyway, so yeah, I have a Bachelor of Science that I finished in 2019, and during that I was at the University of Waterloo in their co-op program, and one of my co-op placements was with the Work Learn Institute, and at the time it was actually still called WATCASE. So I worked with Dave then, and while I was there, we both worked on an article that we published called about creating inclusive co-op workplaces for 2SLGBTQ+ students. So I volunteered while I was at the University of Waterloo with the Glow Center for Sexual and Gender Diversity, which is like their student center. It's volunteer run, where 2SLGBT students could come and hang out and hold events, things like that. So I went there and I asked some people if they'd be willing to participate in the study with us. And we did that, and it went really well. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. And after I was finished at the University of Waterloo, I went back to do my Bachelor of Social Work. And now I am back there for a third time doing my Master's of Social Work. So I've been at the Waterloo for something like 9 years now. I don't know, I've lost count, but something keeps bringing me back. And while I'm doing my Master's of Social Work, I've been working at the YMCA of Three Rivers. I specifically work in their Immigrant Services department as their 2SLGBTQ+ diversity and inclusion worker. And so while I'm there, I basically do presentations like this. That's mostly the biggest part of my role, where I teach people about these types of topics, and how to create inclusive workplaces, or just be, sometimes I'll do it for community members and how to support their family members, things like that. And then occasionally I'll also support newcomers to Canada who are part of the 2SLGBT community. So yeah. As for the research that I did with Dave, there was a bunch of themes that came out. We've just kind of highlighted a couple of them here just so you get a sense of what the study was like. So one thing that came up during the interviews, it was one-on-one interviews with some students, was how recruitment is. And so one student said that if they know that a workplace is inclusive, it would make it to the top of their priority list. It'd be something that they'd look for when coming to a co-op job. And all of the students were part of the co-op program at the University of Waterloo. So that was a huge thing. And then also the interpersonal dynamics at their co-op jobs. They said things like it's important for supervisors to set a good example about inclusion, because if the people who are in charge are saying certain things, then how is that going to impact what other people say? So it was those types of themes that we kind of pulled out from that study. So that's a brief introduction about me. I'll be back later, but I'll hand it back over to Dave now.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Beck. It's so cool to see you back, kind of full circle from research assistant to doing some of this work in the community. We're really fortunate to have Beck here. She can speak to both the student experience, the researcher experience, and also kind of, practitioner experience. So really powerful to have you on the panel today. So as you get the sense from what Beck's talking about, not everything is okay. We can do better. And so the key question is, what can we do? And when we talk about we're kind of emphasizing the role of hosts, employer organizations, the folks that manage policy and practice in the workplace. And so to help us address that, I'm really excited to have Andy, Robin, and Brittany from Sienna join us. It's now that I'll ask Andy to join us on screen, because Andy will give a brief introduction to that team. And then following that, we'll have a bit of a discussion about today's topic as a panel. So Andy, welcome. So nice to see you. Over to you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Dave. And I'm really excited to be here and be a part of this panel. And as Dave said, I am going to bring a lens from an employer experience and what we're doing, some of the things we're doing at Sienna to create an inclusive environment for all. So before I get into it, I do want to do a quick intro of the three members from Sienna. So I'll start with Brittany Koa. She is actually, as you heard in the beginning, the External Communications Associate, but Brittany actually began her career with Sienna as a co-op student. And she was a co-op student for approximately 8 months. She graduated last year, and then earlier this year began her communications role in our marketing team. And so I invited Brittany to come here today to really give a perspective from someone who's been a co-op student, so gone through that search for a company that they want to use as a co-op experience and get that work experience. But then also as she left school and went into the search for an employer to start her journey or start her career, and how she landed back here at Sienna and kind of the environment that led her to come back to this company. So I also have invited Robin Chien to be a part of this panel with me. Robin has been with Sienna for just over 3 years. She works in our R&D team. And she says, like, part of her role is to break things, right? So she's part of the testing organization, so she loves to break things. The thing about Robin, when she joined this organization, she joined when we were kind of still in the middle of COVID. But one of the questions she asked right away is, where's the presence of the LGBTQ plus membership and that community that is here? You know, we definitely had a Pride ERG, but we didn't have that representation fully here in Canada. And so Robin, not one to kind of ask a question and not have an answer, has jumped right in. And she is the lead for our Pride ERG, of which I'll talk a little bit more in the next slides. She is a very active member there. And so, you know, again, I invited Robin here to speak from her experience of being a member within this community and the space that we create here at Sienna. So last but not least, Andy Winter, as you heard, I lead DE&I for Sienna. And, you know, I like to say that my DE&I experience is a mixture of lived experience as a Black female. I'm always out, right? There's no hiding this, there's no masking it, but also book smarts and work experience. So I bring about 25 years of HR experience. I bring that lens to my role in DE&I. So that's the team. You've seen some of the quotes from the team, as well as, you know, wanting to keep that theme of we all have our support animals out there. And so, you know, now you can see who's on the panel. So I wanted to touch on 2 areas where, as an employer, we can create a space for employees to arrive, for students to arrive, and to have that community right away. And one of those places is our employee resource groups. We have 7 of them, and globally we have just over 2,000 members. And I know many companies have ERGs, but some of the things or some of the places where I find that they falter is being able to support those ERGs. So all of our ERGs have executive sponsorship as well as funding. And the other thing that is really important with our ERGs is not just creating a community within Sienna, right? It is about creating a community and externally, right? So engaging with individuals who are part of these memberships, part of these groups. And as I said, Pride at Sienna is one of our groups where we're not just internal, we make connections with other clients. So trying to make sure that we build those connections outside of Sienna, but then we also participate within the community. And that's more of a show up where people are at. You can't always wait for people to come to you. You need to be out there having conversations, particularly with members of our LGBTQ plus community, to help them to understand that there is that space there where you can talk to us. You can be your full self here, and it's not going to have an impact. I hear from so many individuals in this community where they're like, if I share who I am, it not only might not be accepted, it could be career limiting. And so, you know, we do have leaders within our organization who are open allies, but then also open members of this community. So, you know, our ERGs, every company can do an ERG, but you need to make sure that you're leading authentically, you're including members from each of these communities to help lead these ERGs, and being able to create that space where people can feel safe. So that's a little bit about our ERGs. And the other program that we brought into place about 3 years ago is our Culture Ambassador Program. One of the things that I saw within the research that Dave shared was the fact that many individuals don't know whether companies are being authentic when they put into their job postings that they are an inclusive place. We include all and we welcome everybody to be a part of our company. You know, being a Black female, I go looking for whether that's true or not, right? For whatever reason, it's like, I can't take your word for it. And I certainly know members of the LGBTQ+ community are looking for outward visions or views that we do have a welcoming space. So the Cultural Ambassador Program allows potential candidates who have applied for roles, be it co-ops or full-time, to book 25 minutes or 30-minute meeting with employees who are not a part of the interview process, not a part of the group that you might potentially join, but they are employees within Sienna who can give you the tea, give you the real deal about what it's like to work at this company, and particularly what it's like to work at this company if you're in a certain group. So many members from our ERG groups participate as cultural ambassadors. And anyone can make a request to speak to one of these individuals. I know I took advantage of it as part of my hiring at Sienna, because I didn't necessarily see myself reflected in the senior leadership team or in immediate places where I can see it. So I really needed to understand, what's it like to work at Sienna? And so again, this is a program that many companies can implement. I'm happy to talk to anybody about if this is something that they're interested in putting in place. But particularly for the LGBTQ+ community, this can be a bit of a game changer to really talk to somebody and say, what's it like there, before they make their decision about whether your company is the right place to be. So just a few things that we do here at Sienna. Definitely we'll be back with Brittany and Robin to talk about other things that we do at Sienna, or what the environment is like here. But hopefully those little nuggets for those organizations who have joined this seminar, that helps you to kind of give you some ideas on what you can do. So I think I'm going to pass it back to Dave. We can start to get our panel going.
Yeah, thanks so much, Annie. I mean, I could have just listened to you for the next 25 minutes. It's so cool, right? This whole cultural ambassador program. Like in the literature, they talk about realistic job previews, this whole effort to make sure that people who are applying for a job actually know what life is going to look like in that role. It's so challenging, and it just seems like such an innovative way of getting around that, especially for students who are at the beginning of their career journeys. You don't have a lot of background to pull on. And I should add too, the way that we select speakers for this, or the way that we invite speakers, is we reach out to people in our network, like student advisors or people who have connections with co-op employers. And somebody very quickly emailed us back and said, you know what, you should talk to Sienna. They're doing some really cool things. And in the whole time that I've had a chance to meet the folks at Sienna, I've not been disappointed. So I'm really happy now to take a moment to bring all of our speakers on stage so that we can have a bit of a panel discussion, which we've organized around 2 key questions. Obviously, there's so many things that we could talk about, but when we met as a group and we thought about what are the kind of key issues that we want to address, 2 things came up. The first was about recruitment, kind of like stage 1 of the HR journey, right? How do we design a role and then communicate that to job seekers? And how do we do that authentically, that doesn't, come across in the wrong way? So we'll spend some time talking about that. we'll hear a little bit more about how Sienna addresses that, and then Beck can add in a perspective about the YMCA and their view on that. And then afterwards, we'll have a little bit of a conversation around how to build community. But what we're trying to emphasize here is the intersectionality piece here. You got the sense, that Andy was saying, it's not just about building community within an organization, but it's building bridges across different identity groups, both inside of the organization and outside of it. So I'm really looking forward to having that chat too. So why don't I start? We can go back to that other slide there. The question is, how do we do inclusive recruitment, and how do we do that authentically? And Andy, I'll pitch it over to you, and then feel free to pass it on to your colleagues at Sienna.
Okay, awesome. So, the biggest thing, and I think I just mentioned it, is to be authentic is to really show up in the community, and you don't just have to be a member. So our campus recruiting team, they are present. So our campus recruiting team and also our ERGs, so our Women at Sienna, Pride at Sienna, they actually show up in some cases on campuses. And they're not just there to only there when there is a recruiting event. They're there when there is a resume writing workshop. They're there when there is a hackathon. They're there, like our Women at Sienna is there to be able to give their experience about working in this environment, which for a lot of women, particularly in R&D, is male dominated. We show up in the community so that people have an opportunity to have a conversation with us outside of, I applied for a role and what are you doing for me? When you start to build those relationships outside of that, people think about you as an employer and wanting to think about you first when they are looking for that position or they are looking for that role. So for me, the biggest way is to have people who are members of the community and really show up, not just when it's a what's in it for me, it's a I'm showing up because I'm here to help. And maybe when it comes time, this will be the place that you consider coming to work for. So Robin or Brittany, do either one of you want to kind of comment on your experiences and just share a little bit?
Sure, I can jump in.
Mhm.
So I actually joined Sienna about almost 3 years ago. So I can speak from my own experience, from the user perspective, to make some comment about it. So when I joined, one of the determining factor for me to join Sienna is the person the HR hired me into. He is actually his children is in the community. So what can you do better than that? You can't do better than that. Like, they're actually in the community. They are proud allies for their children. So I actually mentioned that during the whole entire interview process. That was a determining factor for me. I was like, wow, they really do this. They not just like talk the talk, they also walk the talk. They have people who actually part of this in their hiring team. So I think it was really authentic at the time. So yeah, that was a big factor. There was also, they have this cultural ambassador program that Andy was talking about before. So I was being a member of Pride at Sienna. I was actually asked to be one of the hiring fair to talk about the experience I had with Sienna, not just like recruiting them, but just to share my experience, how do I function at Sienna. So I thought that was really great too, for people who want to know more, and they just not just to know the position they will be in, but also the whole entire environment, the people they're going to be work with, all the supporting infrastructure when they are in the company. So that was one of the way to show that we are actually genuinely support the community, not just like we're just slapping some rainbow label everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, and so for me, I started off as a co-op student, and I grew up in Ottawa, so I knew what Sienna was. But when I started, even though I was a student, I was invited into all of these different employee resource groups. So right from day one, I was added into groups or told that I could join if I wanted to. And I just thought it was the coolest thing ever because I had never previously experienced that with any employer before. So I joined quite a few of them. And they aren't just groups, which I thought, oh, it's just gonna, we can message each other. It's probably more of a casual thing. And then I came to realize, no, like we do events together. We are friends. We have a community. We do volunteer work. I don't know, like it was truly such an amazing experience for me to see. And even though I'm a part of all these different groups, I still feel like it's all one big community, because when we have like Asian heritage events, it's not just the people who are in the group that attend those events. Everyone from the company is welcome. So it just creates this big conversation. And yeah, it was truly amazing to see. And then, so when I graduated and my co-op term finished, I was really thinking about like, where do I want to go? What do I want to do? And I did look around, but I ultimately ended up coming back because I don't know, I've just never experienced the actual true community that Sienna really does care about and put time, effort, and money into. So yeah, that was my personal experience. Very positive.
Yeah, well done, Sienna. And Brittany, you're hitting on so many key themes that we see in the research too, like the challenge of creating a community. I think in the last few years has been so overwhelming because everyone's working remotely, and we know it's really hard to build relationships. So Sienna's found some secret sauce to build relationships with their emerging talent. And then the big thing is you just said it, right? Like the reason you went back was that sense of community. When you see yourself connected to the people who constitute the organization, you reported to us like that's the place where I want to work. Did I hear that right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing. I really appreciate that. Beck, how does that resonate with some of the work that you're doing through the YMCA?
Yeah. So for the YMCA, when I applied to the job, it was pretty easy to be like, oh, cool. They're inclusive, supportive, because it literally had 2SLGBT in my role. So that was like a pretty obvious, like, oh, that's a job I'd love to do. But when I got here, and like obviously I'm the only person in my role, so it's not like there's that job listing all the time, but they do a lot of things, like we help at Pride events. Um, we have a JADE, which is like Justice, Access, Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, I think it stands for, team, which basically like their whole job is to talk about like how do we make it more inclusive for everybody, like our workers, and supportive for everyone. So that's like a whole team. They send out like monthly newsletters about like, this is the events that are going on this month, this is what like this month is celebrating, that kind of stuff. So it's basically something that's always talked within the organization. So from the YMCA perspective, I think that is kind of the thing, just like it's an ongoing discussion. But when I was a co-op student, it's kind of like what I talked about before, like with like the study that we did, people put those little blurbs that say like we're inclusive at the end of applications, and we always thought that was all well and good. But for me, it was always, as I think Andy said, someone said, it was like the interview, or I think Robin said during the interview, like getting a vibe of like who's interviewing me, and like, oh, so they hired this person, so that must mean that they're inclusive. One of my old co-op jobs, the director there was like, she had a wife and children, and like she saw on my resume that I volunteered with the Glow Center for Sexual and Gender Diversity, and one of the first questions was about that, because she wanted to talk about that, and that was kind of the interview. So that gave me a good sense right there in the interview of like, oh, this is a good place to work. So I think those really have more of an impact than the like job description itself, is like once we meet the team. So yeah, anyway, that's found
That's
both
powerful.
perspectives.
Yeah, that's powerful. Andy, I kind of want to put you on the spot a little bit to walk us through like why, like how did Sienna figure this out? Why did they think about this as being important to organizational success?
Our ERGs in general, or being authentic?
Well, yeah, the ERG, like the other program, the Culture Ambassador program, like how did you know that this is a way to demonstrate that authenticity?
I wish I could say, how did you know, right? Like there was a crystal ball that says, hey, we need to do that. We do have groups, Global Inclusivity Council. We do have from our ERGs getting feedback from individuals. I think it's leaning on the thoughts and the ideas of employees who come into our organization and understanding their experience that helps us think, we can do something about that, or we can put something in place. But truthfully, like a lot of times it's trial and error, right? You don't know that something's going to work. You have an idea that it might work just from some of the feedback you get, but you don't know that it's going to work until you actually do it. But I would say that, you know, in our experience, trying to create an environment of inclusion, you can't really do that if you don't demonstrate some type of authenticity and letting go of the reins, because nobody can control what's going to come out of the mouth of a cultural ambassador, right? So it's not like they get a script and like, here are only the questions that you're going to answer. We are saying to employees, like, we're letting you have a conversation with these individuals. You volunteered to be a part of this because you want to share your experience. But you know, in some respects, it's kind of Jesus take the wheel. You know, you're not there to sell them the job. You're not there to do anything other than say, this is my experience. And a lot of individuals here at Sienna, if you ask them why they're here or why they stay, like tenure for our organization is crazy. Our attrition rate is low and we have a lot of tenured employees, but they stay because of the people. And so great people begot great people. And so, you know, like I said, trial and error, listening to employees and taking a leap of faith, I think are the key ones.
That's powerful. Yeah, thanks.
I want to add something because our CEO, he actually said word by word, people matters. When he came to our site to give the presentation, like we have this all hand meeting every quarter, he came to our site. The one thing he emphasized over and over again is people matters. Is a company, for a company, the most valuable thing is the people that work here. So they really realize that part and they really find a way to really, you know, show that gratitude. So I think that was secret sauce probably for a lot of enterprise, for a lot of companies out there. Some of them don't even care. They're like saying people, their employee as replaceable. So I have seen so many like toxic environment like that, but for Sienna, they really do think people really important.
So here's the big challenge. This is the question that's coming from the chat. Two people have asked the same question. So I'll kind of pitch it and then anyone feel free to comment. Sienna is a multinational, big budget, lots of employees. Is there a way that we could scale this down? Could we do this in an organization that had, say, 20 people?
Sure. I mean, yes, we are a big organization compared to our competitors, the Cisco's and the like. We are very small at 8,500 people. And like I said, ERGs can exist in many forms. We have official ERGs, but we also have affinity groups, and those are smaller groups. So wherever you have people with like interests and individuals, employees who are willing to help lead those. Some of them are Asian at Sienna group and our Pride group. Many of them started as individuals getting together and having a conversation. And creating a small space. And then they invited some people and then they invited some people. So if you have individuals who have similar interests, desires, you can create that space within your company. It does not require massive budgets or tons of people. You can do it anywhere. Now, if you're a company of two, it's probably not going to work. But I think people with similar interests, you can create that community. You just start on a small scale and build.
That's great advice for those listening, so thanks. I wanted to move on to the second question that to make sure that we've got some time to start there. And Robin, I'm hoping you're okay with me putting you on the spot, because in a previous conversation, we talked a little bit about this idea of building community while recognizing intersectionality. And then you said, well, actually, we need to take a step back and ask the question, why is it even important to ask that question in the first place? So I was hoping, could you kind of maybe walk us through, either Sienna's perspective or your personal experience with why building a community is important? And then if there's time, feel free to comment on how you think that can be done.
Sure. So we always talk about safe space, right? Safe space is you be in the place that you feel like you could be your true self. And building that community is taking a step up. On top of the safe space, you feel comfortable to be yourself here. You also find a sense of belonging. Our slogan this year for the Pride Month is actually work where you belong. So that's what we aim to. That's what we wanted to do. We wanted to build a community that for people feel like this is a people they like to hang out. This is a place they wanted to be. Because, like we spend 8 hours per day in the workplace. That's a lot of time in 24 hours a day. So we're going to make it enjoyable. That's why I think building a community at work is building a network. That's why it's so important. So people will stay when they have hardship, when they feel difficulties at work, they wouldn't just quit. They have people here as their social support network to help them go through this, to talk to them, to like calm them down, to find a solution for them. That's why building a community is so important, in my opinion. And how do we do it here? I mean, look at the list of all the ERGs we have. I never think in a company there's so many ERGs. There's Pride ERG, there's Asian ERG, Women ERG. There's like flavor for everything. So, and we have collaborations all the time. We just had an ERG showcase today as our kickoff of Pride Month. I invited all the representative of all the ERGs to be at this table to talk about all those things. I wanted people who in the other ERGs or people are interested in other ERGs as well to participate in our event like Pride at Sienna. That's how we build a community, is supporting each other. Like that's how we do it.
I'd really love to hear Brittany and Beck's perspective on this. Brittany, maybe in response to, Robin, who's a more senior member of the organization. Are you feeling this as a new member, as a sort of a recent grad? Has that been your experience as well?
Yeah, completely. And I mean, I'm a part of Asian at Sienna, Pride at Sienna, Women at Sienna, and the Next at Sienna. So I feel like it's just so important to have that sense of community and to have like all of my different identities, to have a safe place, to have people that understand, like Robin said, people that support you, that are there for you on an emotional and personal level instead of just, going to work, like I'm having work problems, like to have something for emotional connection. And yeah, like as a newcomer, I feel very incredibly welcomed. I feel like every aspect of myself has a place, and I don't know, I just feel very accepted and comfortable and happy here.
Yeah, Andy, sorry, did you want to jump in?
No, well, Beck, are you, you've been kind of mute. Did you want to add something?
Yeah, I mean, I was just gonna jump off what Brittany said. Yeah, just I feel like the workplaces where I felt like the most valued and like the ones that I enjoyed the most were the ones where, if not people who were like me, that that's great, but that's not going to happen in every organization just because it's luck of the draw. But at least people who are just accepting in general, right? Like I don't want to. We talked about masking earlier. I would never feel comfortable in a job where I have to just like not talk about myself. Because I don't feel comfortable. Like that's a huge, huge part of what will make me want to stay at a job is like, can I talk to my coworkers about myself, right? Like if my coworkers can talk about, their spouses, like I should be able to talk about my partners, for example, without having to hide in like casual conversation. So yeah, and I mean, it's always great if there's people who are like me, but added bonus, but not always going to happen. So I get it.
Yeah, very, very, very true. And just going off of Beck's comment about masking, you know, teaching individuals or having individuals who are here who invite you into having a conversation. So, you know, you talk about your partner and, you know, some individuals might be like, oh, what did you do this weekend? You know, and they're worried about that. Like, oh, who is your partner, right? So being comfortable and helping individuals get comfortable with inviting people into the conversation, and really, if you're asking questions of individuals, really being inquisitive and curious, that's what allows people to open up. You know, I think that that's sometimes the way that individuals are all of a sudden like, oh, I can share something. I can, you know, I'm going to say this. I've had somebody say, well, I said partner, and did you pick up on that? You know what I mean? And so when you've got a lot of people here who are allies or members of the community, who pick up on it and again, invite you into that, having that conversation and being a part of what's going on and not othering you or, you know, allowing you to continue to mask it, you know, as people feel comfortable, I think is really powerful and important, in particular for this community, because you don't know, right? Like I said, I wear my intersectionality on my sleeve. I'm a Black female. There's not a lot of masking of that. But knowing many individuals in this community who expend so much energy hiding who they are or being careful about what they're saying, for me, that's tragic. Like, you just want to get on and do your work. You want to enjoy your time at work, but you also want to get on and do your work and not have to worry about slipping up because it might have a consequence. So again, back to creating that community where everybody's included and everybody's accepted. Is really important. And that's kind of what we strive for here at Sienna.
And we hear that in the research, Andy, with students all the time, where they kind of talk about this cat and mouse game, right? Like you said, that, did you pick up on that? They're saying that they're engaging in all these identity management strategies at work, and they're trying to find out who's on my team, who's not.
Yeah.
And I think what they're saying to us is, we wish that organizations would just take leadership and just lay it out for us. Right, just tell me how you feel about this, and if it's a place for me, I want to come work there. So we can simplify the whole thing and I think make everyone's lives a bit easier. I know that we're kind of running a little bit low on time. I'm reminding the audience members that we do have access to the chat, so feel free to ask any questions there and I can relay them to the panel. And there is a quick one that came up from Hannah, which I think was in response to something Brittany said, which is, what is next ERG?
So next at Sienna is an ERG for people who are early in career. So all of our intern, co-op students, and new grads. It's very nice because being new in your career, it's so nice to have people who are in the same place as you and you can talk about how you have no idea what you're doing, and it's just awesome.
It's good to have a bit of a safe space to admit that, which is an
Yeah.
important thing, right? Because then you end up, you know, the responses are usually helpful following that. And I mean, obviously you have to know that touches my heart as someone who researches co-op and transitions in the workplace, because students are a different group, right? They actually do require a little bit of a different approach to people management. We've actually done some research recently that suggests maybe they want a little more guidance than we offer to other full-time employees, where the buzzwords are always about empowerment and, you know, autonomy and you're in charge, and students are actually saying like, that's great. However, we actually do need a little hand-holding in the first little bit because we really don't know what we're doing, and that's okay. And, you know, it's a bit of a shared journey along the way. I'm seeing a message from someone in backstage saying there's a handful of questions in the Q&A window as well. I might try to get there. If I can't get there, I've also got my colleague, Michaela, who might be able to come on audio and just read out some of those questions, because we do have maybe 5 minutes left. So I'm thinking if there's like 1 or 2 really good questions that jump out, we've got this wonderful panel who can help our audience members sort out these key issues.
Sure. This question comes from Amanda. What strategies do you recommend for reinvigorating initiatives to improve workplace inclusion when the focus on DEI may have stalled at an organization?
That's a big one. Andy, you want to go for it?
That's a big one. That's a good question. You know, we've had a couple of initiatives that we've done recently. We've been focusing on allyship, and we had, as part of allyship, a coffee and chat where we invited executive to come and talk about their experience regarding allyship. We have a few breakout sessions or breakout rooms within the session. It was a great way for people who otherwise wouldn't connect because they're not part of the same group to get together. Anybody could actually sign up for it. But the problem, we couldn't scale it. Right? So we had 30, 40 people, lots of great feedback, 9 out of 10, 8 out of 10. But it was myself and another person in our team, and we're a global organization, so we couldn't scale it globally. So yeah, that's going to happen where initiatives or programs don't work, or we have to, or they die off because they're not scalable. But you know, that's back to the drawing board. And you know, how do we make it work, or what can come out of what we were trying to do to be able to do something else that goes forward. So, you know, things like having our allyship pledge, that's something that anybody can make a pledge. We've got some resources that we have them look through, and then they can make the pledge or nominate someone to do that. That's something that's scalable. And that employees can do it anytime and doesn't require a lot of hand-holding. So sometimes you just have to take a step back on the initiatives and figure out what the actual end goal was and whether there's another way to achieve that. That's what I would say.
Thanks. That's a really great response. Beck, I have a question for you. This might be the last one before we move into a bit of a summary, and you know, maybe there's 30 seconds for some final thoughts from the panelists. The question is, what do you do with the people who don't buy into the program of inclusion in the workplace? I'm sure this is something that you've faced a lot in your advocacy work through the Y. What do you do when the response from the audience is crossing the arms and, you know, why should I care about this? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, it's a hard one because it's happened. I'm gonna kind of integrate a different question that I saw in the Q&A into this, just because I think it's relevant. Someone asked, like, what about other topics that are like a bit more taboo? Like right now there's a huge like wave of anti-trans hate. And that's something I like really, really talk about in my role because it's so prevalent right now. And I've had people push back. I've had questions about why are people like this and things like that. Luckily, knock on wood, I've been in a place where like, no, it's never gotten too nasty. But I think what I usually tell people is like, you can only do so much, right? Like sometimes it's okay to disengage, right? Like obviously if it's a coworker and they're being nasty to someone, not good, and you have to address that. But if it's someone in the community and they're in one of my presentations, I can just be like, hey, you know what? If you want to follow up on this more, we can talk about it later, but like this is not the time and place. And that's okay. Like you're not going to change everyone's minds. Unfortunately, there's people who are willing to listen, and usually they're the ones who are going to my presentations. They're the ones who do genuinely want to learn more. And so those are the people you want to focus on, right? Like the people who are kind of on the edge, like they don't really know a lot, but they are interested and they do want to be better. I'd rather spend my time on them than people who are just they're not being authentic. They don't want to learn. So sometimes it's okay to just be like, I'm not wasting my breath. You only have so much energy. And to be an advocate, it's hard, right? It can be stressful and it can lead to burnout. So do what you can do. I hope that answers it. Mm-hmm.
Great advice. Yeah. We have about 30 seconds per panelist. I just kind of, before we move into a bit of a summary slide and some information on how to get in contact with the folks who are part of today's experience, I just kind of wanted to go one by one. If you have any concluding thoughts that you wanted to share, and Andy, just because you've got your mic not muted, Did you, any summary thoughts you wanted to share with us today?
Yeah, I mean, I guess my only summary, my summary is if you always lead with authenticity and curiosity, you're moving forward in the right direction. Yeah, that's it. That's my parting thought. Be authentic and be curious. It's amazing what you learn about people and how you can grow through those experiences.
Thanks for sharing, Robin.
All right. My final comment is be the change you wanted to see. Do you want to build a community? Start building a community. That's my approach. That's how I met Andy. We met at the women's washroom. I just like saying like, your hair was awesome. Like that's how we met. Like you reach to the right people, you find your right people, you use your energy with the right people, and you build a community that way. Just be the change you want to be.
That's powerful. Thank you. Brittany?
I guess my final thought would be, I guess, just put yourself out there and do the best that you can. Be kind. Kind of saying this to myself. I was nervous to be on a panel, but I'm so happy that I did it and was happy to share and be a part of this. So, yeah.
I mean, you're the next generation, right? Like you're the group that organizations are trying to figure out. So we're so thankful to have you sharing some of your experience. Yeah. So thanks for that. Beck, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I'll do one thing that I say a lot in my presentations is it's okay to make mistakes. One thing I focus on a lot is pronouns, right? Because people almost always ask me like, what do I do if I mess up someone's pronouns? And so this is how I respond to that, but I think it's applicable to everything we've talked about is like, hey, it's okay to make mistakes. What I'm more concerned about is how you react to those mistakes and how you fix your mistakes going forward. And I think as long as you're mindful of that, you're good. So yeah.
That's great. And I do have a nod on, so let me just pause and say thank you so much to the panelists for being a part of this conversation. I've learned a lot. I hope the audience has too. We will have some post-event information on how to get in contact with Beck at the Y, Andy et al. At Sienna. So that's going to come in an email to those of you who have registered. So big thanks. I'm looking forward to continuing the conversation, and I'm also really looking forward to seeing all the ways in which you're willing to support future co-op students. So thanks again for being here. I did just want to close with a summary slide and one slide that has a few pieces of information that you can access post-event. So just a couple thoughts here. The first is there's lots to celebrate. It's Pride Month. There's some amazing events going on in your community. Go check them out. But you know what? We have even more work to do. Some of the survey data in Canada suggests that we might not be going in the right direction. And so we've got to really pause and put in some work. Students in particular are this group who are really uncertain about what life in an organization looks like. So they require a special approach. And Sienna has demonstrated today that there's a couple really cool programs that you might think about replicating in your own organizations. The ERG program is so cool. The Cultural Ambassador program is even cooler. Never heard of anything so unique, in particular when someone's not involved in the recruitment process, but is willing to share their own experiences. And I think ultimately here, the big goal is create a culture of inclusion because it's good for the people in the organization and the organization. Brittany's story about choosing Sienna over other opportunities, I think demonstrates that pretty clearly. If you want to go and find out more about this, we do have a list of resources that you'll receive after the event. But really quickly, I just wanted to highlight a few. Pride at Work Canada is one of the leading groups who's been talking about this stuff for a really long time. And these are all clickable links. So if you can access these slides later, you should just be taken to their website. Spectrum is a group in Waterloo that offers something called Rainbow Diversity Training, which is probably a little bit similar to some of the things that Beck is doing. They offer a 3-part training program on things like pronouns and just like really basic concepts. There's also some resources around coming out at work. So I encourage you to check that out. The YMCA, obviously connect with Beck afterwards because she's doing some amazing work there. And this is a website that offers some external resources. And then if you're on this call because you're really thinking about this in the context of work integrated learning, maybe you work for a university or college and you're thinking about policies and practices that are specific to students, There's actually a lot of work being done in this space. You can find most of it published for free at the International Journal of Work Integrated Learning. I've linked you to one of the articles that's relevant to that sort of work, which is Hay and Fleming's framework that kind of lays out some basic principles that host organizations should be thinking about when they're hosting students from various equity deserving groups. So feel free to peruse those at a later point. We're so happy that you were able to join us today. On the next slide, you'll see a couple pieces of contact information for the Work Learn Institute and myself if you're interested in learning more about the research on this topic. Andy has volunteered to share her contact information if you want to get in contact with anyone at Sienna about this. And there's Beck's contact information at the Y. So thanks again, everyone. Really appreciated your time today, and we'll see you next time. Bye now.